Okay. So real quick, you guys, I'm up here at Sandpoint, Idaho. Today, it's what, Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday afternoon. East Coast, probably looking at 5 o'clock-ish. There's an event happening up here, a meeting that's taking place that you guys are going to want to hear, because it's not only happening up in Idaho, it's happening across the nation. I got somebody here, my friend Casey, who's going to give you a little bit more explanation about what's taking place so that you guys are informed. And the meeting's getting ready to start, so let me turn this around here real quick what he's going to say. Go ahead, Casey.
Hello everyone, so we're here at an event called United Against Hate, and this is an event that was created last year, a campaign that was hosted by the U.S. District Attorney's Office by Attorney General Merrick Garland. And so this, again, as I said, was started last year in 2022, and it was a campaign that all 94 district attorneys' offices are to participate in. And at this event, they're going to teach people about how to report hate incidences if somebody has a bias against race or religion. So that's what's happening, and the event is starting now.
Yeah, let's go in here and listen. And I'm rocking my Trump gear, folks.
Greetings, everybody. Greetings, everybody. Good day. My name is Gary Aiken Jr. I'm the League Tribe of Idaho Vice Chairman and son of a former chairman, Gary Aiken Sr., grandson of a former chairwoman, Amy Trice, who led the council that took the United States government to war in 1974. So I'm the former chairman, and I'm the current vice chair of the tribe. I have 3 wonderful young children, a 17-year-old daughter, a 15-year-old son, and a 9-year-old daughter that I'm raising up in Bonner's Ferry. I spent the last 20 years or so either on council or working for the hatchery programs. I spent the last 20 years or so coaching just about every single sport there is, I think, except for soccer. So just a lot of community interaction. I did the math at one day, and I think I had over 600 kids run through my programs. So it's, I see kids all the time, from young ones to grown adults, and some of those kids even come tell me they love me, and I love them right back. It's a special thing to live in this type of community, right? Growing up in the 80s and the 90s was kind of tough. It was a different era. It had to be tough. Racism was much more upfront and evident. I can say I grew up with my guard up. Resiliency is a key component to our people. So it's different growing up with your guard up. And I left you prepared. As I had that kind of chip on my shoulder from the experiences I had growing up, and it led me to study extensively. I studied the Indian Wars. I wanted to know more about other people like me, like us. I studied the modern history of the Native American movements, from AIM, the American Indian Movement, to the takeover of Alcatraz, the takeover of Washington D.C. federal buildings, a lot of protesting revolutionaries. The Wounded Knee in 1973. That was a big, impactful moment for us that I learned about in my teens. So it led me to go around with a free Leonard Peltier, the zipper holder, because that meant something to me, being a revolutionary, standing up for what's right, standing up against those who are wrong. And I studied AIM, and that led me to learn more about the War of 1974, which my grandma was able to push forward to give our people what they needed to survive. Up until that point, we had no land base because we wouldn't leave our home. They wanted to push us over to Montana, over to Tucson, Standing Arrow land, where our brothers and sisters were, but we didn't want to stay there. That wasn't our home. This is our home. So we would not leave. We stayed in this area over and over again and refused to leave because this is home for us. This has always been our community. We've always had different people into our community, and we've been able to hold that community spirit with them. Now, the chip on my shoulder I'm talking about, I grew up thinking that the first contact with Kootenays and non-Kootenays, it had to have been such a horrible situation, oppression, forcing us into this religion and forcing us into these things. And when I did the studying, I quickly learned that we were some of the easiest converts because our spirituality had told us what was coming. And we understood the big picture of it, and it jived with what we already did. So instead of this big fight that I had imagined went on in my mind, we showed up at church almost 7 days a week, immediately. And also the reading about the trading posts. There's that old term, I don't know if you've heard, I'm sure you have, honest Injun. And the origins of that, I believe, is from the fact that we could go to the trading posts when the owner of the post wasn't even there. And we knew the amounts that we traded for, and we were able to do our trading just without them there. They trusted us because we would always be honest and on the upright. So we've been working with our community ever since first contact. We've always welcomed everybody into our community since first contact. And we are still this way. Today we lead in collaboration. We learn to get the fights out of the way and learn on what we can work on together to move forward into the future. And we hope to lead that way into the future continuously. We become writing a blueprint of collaboration by putting aside our differences and learning what we can agree upon and what makes us strong together to move forward with those. So with that, it's my distinct honor to welcome everybody to Amakis Tanaka, to Kootenai territory, in our traditional original territory. I would say aboriginal, but that's a misnomer. That's original. Aboriginal denotes that you came from somewhere else and you entered that. This is our original territory. So I'm going to welcome everybody to our territory with open arms and an open heart. And I want to welcome everybody to today's forum, again, United Against Hate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I can see myself on a screen, so I'm going to assume that you can see and hear me. I'm really sorry that it did not work out for me to get there with you all today. The plane did not land in Spokane. We tried 2 different trips and 4 different landing approaches that were unsuccessful. So that's what I get for trying to come in on the same day. Next time I will come in the night before. But this is a really important event nonetheless. I'm glad to be with you there virtually and with you fully in spirit. I want to thank Vice Chairman Aiken for his wonderful welcome, and to the entire Kootenai Tribe of Idaho for co-hosting this event with us and putting in so many resources to make today possible. I also want to thank, of course, the Bonner County and Boundary County Human Rights Task Forces for committing the time, energy, and resources to making today possible. I know that the content you're going to hear today not only comes from my office, but from those task forces and and community partners that they've assembled for the important messages that you'll hear today. Finally, of course, I want to thank you all for coming. Some of you have traveled, driven long distances to be with us today, and we are really grateful for this opportunity to share with you this United Against Hate forum. So let me cover what we hope to accomplish today, and then I will pass the mic, so to speak, back to the people that are there in person. But United Against Hate, as you may know, is a nationwide Department of Justice initiative that has a couple purposes, and I'm really proud to lead those efforts here in Idaho with my colleagues who you'll meet today. Here are the three kind of buckets, the three categories of what we hope to accomplish today. First, you will hear from law enforcement officials, both at the federal and state level, about the law, in particular about hate crimes laws, and even more importantly, about how to report hate crimes and hate incidents if they occur and you are affected by them or know someone who is. Secondly, in addition to that, you will hear from community leaders about their own experiences in Bonner County, in Boundary County. Not only what those experiences have been, for better or for worse, but how those individuals in our community together has responded to acts of hate, intimidation, or harassment. And that will happen primarily through the panel that we'll have towards the end of the program today. So I hope you're all really excited for that. That will be a highlight of today. And then finally, I hope that through this program today, we all can take some time from our busy schedules. And again, thank you for doing that. But use the opportunity here during and after the event to reflect on what is actually happening. And what's happening is that different people from different backgrounds, different experiences, maybe some have been in Idaho for generations, maybe some are indigenous to Idaho, maybe some are new to Idaho. Maybe we have different views on all sorts of matters. But what I hope we can take a moment to do is to reflect on what it is to be an American. And at its core, what it is to be an American is to abide by the rule of law as written in our Constitution and our other laws, and recognize that regardless of our views, regardless of our backgrounds, regardless of our religious faith backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, etc., that in order for our society to be as successful as it is, and has been, and I hope will continue to be, we need to respect those differences and commit to nonviolence as we sort through societal changes and civic discussions. So that's why today is so important, not only to talk specifically about hate crimes, but also to rededicate ourselves to the core values of the rule of law, which is to coexist peacefully, recognizing our differences, but recognizing that those differences make us stronger when we participate in our government and in civic society together with respect and with the recognition that we need to listen to each other in order to make progress and in order to achieve the things that are most important to each of us. So again, I'm really sorry and sad that I'm not with you there in person to meet with you and shake hands and hear your questions after the program. But we'll just have to do it again. Always love coming up to North Idaho, and so we'll be there again shortly. But you're in good hands with Tracy and the rest of my colleagues. And again, Vice Chairman Aiken, thank you so much. And thank you to the task forces again for all your work and support and dedication. And thank you to Mike Soar from the Community Relations Service, who will be speaking. And then finally, I think he's there, Lewis Marshall, the Bonner County Prosecuting Attorney, who you'll hear from, is a great partner of my office in our pursuit of the rule of law and enforcing the rule of law So again, thank you so much. I hope you were able to hear me, and who cares if you can see me, but I hope you're able to hear me, and I hope that you will accept today's program with the spirit in which it is intended, which is bringing the community together, connecting you with law enforcement resources so that we can combat unlawful hate when it occurs. Thank you so very much.
We're just working out a few technical aspects to see whether we're going to keep Josh with us or let him go. So we'll find out. So we're going to bring up a brief PowerPoint and all right, so while we're getting set up, just thank you all for being here. We did this event down at the Coeur d'Alene Casino, hosted by the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and I want to say we had 215 people. This morning, the registration looked like it was at about 174 or 178, so in a much smaller venue. And it is wonderful to have so many people here. As you will note, similar to the first one, it's not a discussion that's provided information, but we would be happy to talk to you afterwards. If anyone has any questions, we'll be here. And so we want to start off. My name is Tracy Whalen with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I'm the branch manager. I've been in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Coeur d'Alene for 25 years. And my colleagues here, we have the screen, so we're just going to take turns jumping through it and then try not to disturb your PowerPoint.
Hi everyone, I'm Elizabeth Tullivskull. I'm the Tribal Victim Assistance Specialist in the U.S. Attorney's Office. I've been with the office for a little over 3 years. I assist victims when a case comes to federal court. Through the process, if you're the victim of a crime in federal court, you are afforded specific rights as mandated by federal legislation. And so I'm there to make sure the government upholds its obligations to victims. And as the Tribal Victim Assistance Specialist, I assist those victims of crimes that occur on one of the 5 federally recognized reservations throughout the state of Idaho.
I'm Special Agent Brian Gunnarsson with the FBI. I've been with the FBI for about 18 years. The majority of up here in the North Idaho area, in the Coeur d'Alene area. And one of the primary areas that I focus on are hate crimes, civil rights violations, and those. And that's what I'm here to talk to you a little about, to give you resources, give you my name. If you hear things, then feel free to contact me, and to just answer questions as they arise.
And we're just kind of going to do a shuffle here. So we're fairly informal people, but as we try to do this, we only have so much space. And Annie from our office has cards. You'll be happy to know to tell us when our time is up, so that we can wrap it up and not talk too long. So just that's okay. So, this one? So just a brief history, right? Just putting things in context generally helps. When we're talking about hate crimes, when we're talking about civil rights legislation, and this is very, very condensed. Our whole presentation is 20 minutes, so we'll have resources for you afterwards if you want to talk to us. But we need to think about the fact that the Civil War ends, I believe, in April of 1865. And the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, is ratified by the states in December of 1865. And that very same month, the Confederate veterans established the first KKK group in Tennessee. So the states ratify the amendment to abolish slavery, but yet we have a group whose intent has been debated throughout the ages, and everyone can come to their own conclusion about what that intent was, but it comes up at the same time. And so you have the passage of the 14th and the 15th Amendment, one in 1868, just 3 years later, and the 15th in 1870, just a few years later. Now, the 14th Amendment was designed to guarantee that citizens would have equal civil and legal rights with former slaves and to people born in the United States. And that no person, and you've also often heard this as the Due Process Amendment, right? That no person can be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law and equal protection for all people. The 15th Amendment then still, there needs to be further action because what's happening? Individuals are being denied the right to vote. And so we have a specific amendment that guarantees the right to vote, that it cannot be denied based upon race, color, or previous status as in servitude. And in between this time, between the 13th Amendment and the 15th Amendment, there are many things going on that Elizabeth is going to tell us about.
Okay, so despite the passage of the 14th and 15th Amendments, there were still groups in some states committed to denying Black citizens the right to exercise their legal rights, like the right to vote, the right to run for public office, and so on. So the Enforcement Acts were passed, and that gave the President of the United States the power to use military force to protect those rights. And then additionally in 1870, the Department of Justice was created, and that was primarily out of the need for, from the Civil War, there came a lot of litigation, and the US government realized quickly that it was very expensive to retain private attorneys to handle all that litigation. So the Department of Justice was created basically to handle the US's legal business.
And so you can see, right, and if you can't hear me, please raise your hand in the back. I have a pretty loud voice. But as state actions expand, so do the civil rights statutes. And we have a number of them listed here. You start off with just conspiracy, because there were individuals conspiring to keep people from being able to vote. And a simple Google search for anyone who's interested brings up terrible atrocities that happened during this period of time. Depriving individuals' rights under the code of law. Perhaps that is a law enforcement official who doesn't allow somebody to exercise their rights, and they're doing it as the law enforcement official. And then we get to protected federal activities, which is really what we talk about. We have crimes, right? And try not to go off script, but I am aware though that some people want to know, why do we even have this conversation? Why do we even care about hate crimes? I mean, a crime is a crime, so what does it matter if it's a hate crime? Well, it matters because you're committing a criminal act, but what you're being motivated by is your hate for another group. And if you think about that, hate towards an entire group of individuals, and you put those two things together, and you have hate crimes. And that's what we're talking about. Now, if somebody chooses to live their life and believes hate is healthy, that somebody believes that hate helps them in life, that God told them you should hate certain people, that is their individual choice. I would submit, personally, not on behalf of the Department of Justice, that's probably not a very healthy way to live, but that's just me. But as an assistant United States attorney, when you combine that hate with criminal conduct, that is when the United States of America is going to stand up and say, not in this country. On behalf of all of the citizens, we are going to protect the right to vote, protect the right to go to state-run parks, protect the right not to be discriminated against. And that's what we're talking about. You have to have the combination of a crime and the motivating conduct is hate. We're not here just to talk about hate. When you look at 18 U.S.C. 245, right, it prohibits willfully injuring, intimidating, or interfering with any person or attempting to do so by force or threat of force because of race, color, religion, national origin. Now, this is one of the very first civil rights laws. And what do we notice that's not there? Gender's not there. What else isn't there?
Sexual orientation.
Sexual orientation is not there. And so we start off with these four. And so what are the federally protected activities? So what we talked about before, public education, right? Things that the government is involved in. Maintaining public parks, keeping somebody from a park that is funded by the public and saying some members aren't entitled to use them. Employment, jury service, interstate commerce. But then, as you are all aware, hate crimes have continued. So we have the Shepherd-Bird Act, Prevention Act of 2009. Now you all know the story of James Byrd, Jr., who was in Texas. And he was targeted specifically because he was black. And he was beat and he was dragged because he was black. Equally, there's the story of Matthew Shepard in Wyoming, and we're on the western states. And Matthew, people who beat and killed him and left him tied up to a fence, did so because of either his actual or perceived gender identity or sexual orientation. It would be sexual orientation in this case. And so these two acts come into law. Now what we need to know is that for the second one, there has to be an interstate commerce element. That is, meaning something had to have been transported in interstate commerce. The truck that's used, the gun that's used for a killing, there has to be a connection. And we're going very quickly because we want you to really hear from the panel. I mean, your own people up here is really great. But Brian's going to walk us through a few other statutes and what to do if you think you are aware of a hate incident.
So what's up here now is this basically just is a chart that kind of shows what the difference between the 3 hate crime statutes that have been discussed. And as you can see, it's And what you'll see is each one of our statutes, the laws are very particular about which ones we can use and how we can use them. And it's all based upon what the element of the hate is, whether it's national origin, gender, religion. And so this slide just kind of walks you across how we have to make those decisions about where we're going to park these laws and how we may proceed a case against an individual. So the other hate crimes that we have is USC 247, and this is basically where the religion crimes start to come into. That's a crime to deface religious real property. That includes buildings, so that's such as painting a swastika on the outside of a Jewish synagogue would fall into this statute. Defacing a religious cemetery, destroying statues at the cemetery would fall under this statute at the first part. And then we get into, actually go back. There's also the component that if you obstruct somebody from going to practice their religion based upon their race, religion, and things like that. So not only can you not destroy their religious property, you can't prevent somebody from trying to practice the religion that they want to practice. Then 3631, this statute talks about housing rights, and it's kind of similar to the others that basically says somebody should be able to live where they want to, be able to rent, buy a home, and they should not be prevented from that based upon race, color, religion, national origin. And here we start to see some of the gender coming in, if they have a disability or their familial status. And what that means is some individuals have 2 or 3 generations that live together in one home. You can't discriminate or prevent them from residing where they would like to reside just because the way they live is different than the way you live or from these other protected items. So once again, here's kind of a chart that just kind of shows those statutes, how they compare. And once again, you start to see where under each statute allows or prevents certain things. So sexual origin, their gender preference, things like that. A lot of the statutes we can't prosecute. There's a couple of them that have those as addendums to, that's a discrimination that can't be done. But a lot of the statutes, they're primarily due to when they created, it's religion, it's your race, it's your lifestyle, and things like that. That are in each of the statutes, how they become into law is that bottom line. It tells you which law or basis that the U.S. government is using to create the original statute to allow us to prosecute crimes that fall into that area. So, as has been mentioned a little before, we have this term that gets thrown out that's called hate crimes, and we have what's a hate incident. What a hate incident is, it's basically stuff that is protected by the First Amendment. So people can gather and they can say hateful things about a group. They can circulate materials about hate and things like that. They can post bigoted views online. That stuff is all protected by the First Amendment, and what we consider that is a hate incident because it does affect individuals. From a criminal perspective, that's not a crime because they haven't violated, they haven't threatened, they haven't attempted to go after anyone. Although the verbiage that's used may be very offensive and may be threatening to others, a threat has to be very articulated in such that I'm going to shoot you because you are X. If it's just saying all blank people should die, that doesn't qualify because that is not a threat that is articulable. They're just voicing an opinion. And so when we get complaints and calls that come into the office, we have to make the judgment call as to, is this something that's falling into a crime? Is this just an incident? And that will determine what we can do from a federal perspective as to whether we pursue charges against somebody or we have to kind of just note that the event occurred and then move on. And I think I kind of covered this with what a true threat is, and then it basically has to promote violence towards the other individual. So this chart just is a quick chart that shows kind of how hate incidents and hate crimes associate, as well as the other item that's out there, which is discrimination. Some discrimination events can be considered hate crimes, and if you get discriminated, there may not be a lot of avenues that you can follow, but there are some types, depending on how they fall, allows the victim some rights to potentially pursue some sort of recourse against the other individual. So to kind of show how do you report it, as I kind of said, a lot of times call the FBI. We have an office. A lot of people aren't familiar that there is an FBI office in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. That's where I work. You can call and then just ask for me. They will relay your message to me, and then I will do my best to get back to you as quickly as possible to discuss the matter and see where we are kind of with the incident that has occurred. There are also other avenues, whether there's some items online, but just because an incident has occurred does not mean the FBI can open a case, and we will not open a case unless we have some pretty good facts that support that a criminal violation has occurred. And sometimes we will get those facts, we will open an investigation, and we realize that it's not quite meeting the statutes, so we will then close the investigation and move on with other complaints that end up coming into our office.
So most hate crimes are going to include property damage, assault, or intimidation. And I come in, of course, to help victims. Research indicates that victims of hate crimes, they suffer long-lasting psychological effects and higher incidence of emotional distress than those who are victims of non-hate crimes. So obviously, mental health counseling is a key component for victims to start healing from the incident. So I help connect victims to those services Other services they may need might include medical attention or shelter. So I'm just sort of there to help them connect if they want to those services. And then I also help them file claims for restitution with the court and also apply for crime victims compensation. That's a program. Together, restitution and the victims comp, they can cover reimbursing victims for medical bills that insurance didn't cover, for that mental health counseling, for property damage that was a result of the crime, or paying for lost wages because they had to take time off work to deal with everything. And then I also help them with the courts, so keeping them informed of all of the trials related to their case, connecting them to the prosecutor if they have questions about the case, familiarizing them with the courtroom if they're going to have to come and testify. That can be really daunting to someone. So that's basically what I do. Let's see. Other avenues that can be pursued are, of course, civil lawsuits, whether or not an incident has risen to the level of a crime. A lot of victims do pursue civil justice. I'm not involved in that, but that is something that victims can pursue on their own. And then we've updated our data since our last event last fall. And actually, I should say not we, the FBI did. This is the data for Idaho for 2022. I'm not sure if you can really see that. It's kind of small, but these are the hate incident statistics showing you 2022, 21, and 20. Pretty steady numbers as far as incidents from bias, motivation of race, ethnicity, ancestry, and religion, and sexual orientation. Those are the top ones that we've seen here in Idaho.
And as we said, we went through this pretty quickly, but we want you to hear from the panel. We will be around afterwards to talk about this. Also, the direct line to my desk is 208-676-7344, and I'm happy to get that to you afterwards if you want to walk through the statutes a little bit more. So we are going to take down our PowerPoint and try to get some light in here, open up some windows, and invite Lewis Marshall to come on up. So come on up, Mr. Marshall. As you may well know, Mr. Marshall is the prosecuting attorney for Bonner County, and we appreciate him being here.
Wow, it's packed. I didn't realize it with the lights up. As Tracy said, Tracy and I have been friends for a long time. She's a really nice lady. I am the prosecuting attorney at the end of my 4th term. And who knows, I may run for another one, or it depends on the day sometimes. I may do something else. But no, I really do enjoy my job here in Bonner County. My colleague, Andrew K. Pluitt from Bonner's Ferry is back in the back. We were deciding who gets to talk and who doesn't get to talk. And typically, she should be the one doing the talking because she's much better than I am. But she reminded me that I'm a lot older than she is, and that I probably should know more than she does, which is not true. All right. So you're asking, what about Idaho? We just heard from the federal government. What about us? Do we have hate crimes laws? And the answer is yes, we do. And I brought my readers, thank goodness. But it is encapsulated in Chapter 79, Title 18. Title 18 is the crimes. All of the entire thing is crimes in the state of Idaho. And so there is a chapter, and it's called malicious harassment. And basically, it kind of mirrors what the feds do when you're only talking about race, color, religion, ancestry, or national origin. So you're not talking about gender, and you're not talking about gender identity. And then the state statute talks about cause physical injury to another person or damage, destroy, or deface any real or personal property of another person or threatened by word or act to do the acts prohibited if there is a reasonable cause to believe that any of the acts described in subsection A and B of this section will occur. Thank goodness I'm a lawyer, and I know what that means. The issue with hate crimes, state statute hate crimes, is it's what we call a specific intent crime. And I don't know if you know what the difference is between a general intent and specific intent, but specific intent is much harder to prove than general intent. General intent just means you meant to do an act, and then consequences flowed from that act. I shot a pistol and it killed someone. Specific intent means that you meant to cause specific injury to that person. So how does that relate to this? Well, we have to prove that the person was not only hurting or defacing someone's property, but they did it with a specific intent due to one of those things. So the net result is, well, we really don't charge this crime very often. When I was thinking about what I was going to say today, I was like, I don't really even remember the last time my office charged this crime. And I guess you could be asking yourself, well, why are you even up here talking about this if it's hard to charge and you don't do it very much? And the reason is not only is it important, but we utilize some of these things in our day-to-day jobs when we're talking about normal crimes. I'll give you a little story. Unfortunately, it involves one of the worst crimes that I've ever had to deal with, and I will spare you the details of it by and large. But it was something I never thought could happen in Sandpoint. 6 years ago, we had a young man by the name of Govinda Sikh, and Mr. Singh. And Mr. Singh was a Sikh, and so his family came from that region of India, which was kind of a tough, in the mountains, and they had strife for many, many years between Pakistan and India. A wonderful family. They moved over here and they ran a cab company at the airport. They also ran a restaurant, downtown Spokane, Indian restaurant. I got to know them really pretty well, and they're really neat people. Well, Govinda, who went by the nickname Dagger, was a sweet kid. He was in his early 20s. He hadn't even been married yet. Just a neat, all-around kid. Working for the family in both the restaurant and as a cab driver. He picks up a young man by the name of Jacob Coleman one day. And Jacob was going to go to Gonzaga. Jacob was from Puyallup in western Washington, and he was supposedly going to be a student at Gonzaga University. Well, this turned out to be not what happened. And unfortunately, they get to Gonzaga, he doesn't get out, they drive, and they eventually drive all the way up to Hope to here. So, this doesn't sound like it could happen, and it really doesn't seem like it did happen, but unfortunately it did. And eventually, this young man, 19-year-old man, murdered Mr. Singh in his cab. We had video evidence of this because the cabs had GoPro, and so we actually had to watch it as it happened, which was absolutely horrific. I wish I never had to see that, but I did. So immediately you're thinking, it's a hate crime, right? Here is a Singh. He's clearly from India or Pakistan or Bangladesh or somewhere there, and he's killed by a young white male. So my mind goes there as well. We look at some of the specific facts of the case, and Mr. Coleman never gets out of the cab. So he murders this young man and then never gets out. Well, that kind of is another strike as a hate crime, because he seems like he's proud of what he did. It's not like he robbed him and then he ran, so that there might be some other motive other than hate. So I'm clearly going down the road of hate crime. When you say, well, yeah, you've got this statute here, Mr. Marshall, you've got this law that you could charge him with, but there's also the bigger law, and that's murder, and it's first-degree murder. And so I made the decision at the time to file the death penalty, which I had not done before, and I wish I never would have to do again, but I thought that the circumstances of that case warranted the death penalty at the time. So as part of that, Sheriff Wheeler was good enough to send a lot of his detectives over in Puyallup, and we started to do a digging into this young man's background, Mr. Coleman, to see what was in his heart. Was this a race-based, national origin-based murder, or was it something else? And when we started digging into Coleman's background, there weren't any of the red flags that we normally could see. A lot of times with a lot of these characters that I've dealt with over the years, you know, they're pretty prolific in their ideas, and they're all too willing to tell you what they think. And especially with social media now, it's pretty easy to go and see what their beliefs are on other races. So we looked at his Facebook. We talked to kids that went to school with him. We talked to his friends. None of it was looking like there was a reason that he killed this young man because he was Sikh. And so we're like, that's a little weird. You know, I was really ready to believe that that was the truth. So it turned out in the end that it was not the reason. It was not his motive. What his motive was, I don't know. But it was not because this young man was a Sikh. Had it been just a white kid, he would have done the same thing. So why is it important? Well, it's important because, well, motive is not an element of a crime. We all want to know why people did what they did. And if they did so based on hate, well, we can charge this crime under Idaho. A good thing about Idaho law that is different than other states and even the federal government, to be honest, is we have a wide latitude and discretion in what to sentence people for and to. And what that means is, like other states, they have guidelines, and the federal government has guidelines. So if you do a crime and you've got this such and such criminal history, you're basically going to get this. We don't have that in Idaho. In Idaho, if you commit a murder, you can get anywhere from 10 years minimum all the way up to death penalty. And it's really, besides the death penalty, if we're just going to talk life in prison, it's up to the judge. It's up to the sentencing judge. And so the reason why looking at motive is important is we can utilize some of those factors, these aggravating factors, when we're sentencing someone. And we darn well sure do. And there's no question. You're going to look at the type of person that the defendant is, and if he has hate in his heart, and if he has committed these things for those reasons, we're going to hold that against him. And I believe that that's the right thing to do. I think it's supported by the law. Similarly, if a person is a fairly good person, they committed a bad act, but you know, we're going to use that as mitigation. And I think that just kind of talking anecdotally from just my experience, and I see a lot of folks that have been here for a long time, it seems to me locally that we're doing better here, and I'll tell you why. And, I can tell you that when I was younger, when I was Andy Kay's age, and I was trying people, I would see a lot of the telltale signs on a lot of our defendants. You know, you come in and they have the lightning bolts, swastikas on their neck, they have all the telltale signs. I don't see that as much anymore. So I think that's a good thing. I can tell you just another brief one. My first murder case that I tried in 2005, the young man murdered a gentleman. It wasn't a gentleman of color or anything like that, but after he did so, he was bragging to a person who was high up in the area Knights, a local person from here, who was high up in the area Knights, and he had basically committed the murder in part to, quote, make his bones, which meant to get him into the area Knights. And so it was kind of a right in your face for me, that it was like, wow. You know, you hear about this stuff or you watch it on TV, but this actually happened in Sandpoint. And I don't know, but I think in the last 18 years, 20 years, we've gotten better in that regard. I'm proud of that. I agree with the FBI agent that some of the things that we have seen, of course, in the past are the distribution of pamphlets, racist pamphlets and stuff. It used to be quite a bit more back in the earlier this century. We have had it more recently. There was a gentleman that moved in here and was distributing it. Well, that is not a hate crime. You should contact local law enforcement. lo and behold, the guy, well, we couldn't get him for the materials that he was distributing. He like littered some of those materials. So we got him for littering. And so the point is, even where the laws don't support us, we are going to take these things seriously. We're going to try to stamp it out. There is no room for it here in Sandpoint, here in Bonner County. And I'm very proud of it in this community, and I hope all of you are as well. Thank you.
Next, I'm going to ask our panel members to come forward, along with the moderator, and we'll help you get on stage here and present the next part of this. If anybody who's on the side wants to open the curtains, feel free to do that. Allow a little bit of natural light in, or make it a little lighter. I think this little curtain is on the side.
Hello, I'm Brenda Hammond, representing the Bonner County Human Rights Task Force, and I can say on behalf of the task force, we're absolutely thrilled that so many of you are here. This is an important meeting, and we feel very encouraged and very supported by the presence of folks from the Department of Justice here. So I'm glad you're here to hear what they have to say, and I'm here just to moderate the panel. We have here Vice Chairman Aiken from the Kootenai tribe. We have Sandy Nizzoli, who is representing, she's the current secretary of the Human Rights Task Force. We have Elsie Hollenbeck, who has been a resident and a member of the Boundary County Task Force in Bonners Ferry for a number of years. And then we have Pastor Andrew Hinderly of the First Lutheran Church in Bonners Ferry. And they're each going to tell you a little bit about challenges that they have faced in the community, how they addressed them, what the outcomes were. And so I'd like to ask Vice Chairman Aiken to go first.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. When asked to think about some incidents or some things having to do with hate or bigotry and those type of things, I live such a busy life being vice chair that I kind of put that aside a little bit. One is because it's busy, and the other is that I knew that whenever I got to thinking about it, I was going to be able to come up with something. That I've definitely faced different things in this life growing up. And it shouldn't be too hard to figure out what I could talk about, essentially. So it came down to like how we grew up. Like I spoke of earlier, the 80s, was a pretty tough generation, pretty tough era to grow up in. The bigotry was very upfront. I remember as a young child, about 3 or 4 years old, in those eras, you hear things like racial jokes were prominent. I heard the N-word in like various situations. Pollock jokes. The remnants of the German influence and Nazism and all that. And that was just a normal thing to hear. It took me to learn as I was growing up that the wasn't just a normal thing, right? You know, our people, Indians being disrespected. You know, you're just a dumb Indian, or a dirty Indian, or a drunk Indian. There's these things that were the stigmas, you know, that we had. And it's easy to say, you know, sticks and stones may break my bones, right? Or sticks and stones, but the thing is, I've seen the effects of that. I've seen people carry that weight on them. I've seen them have to walk through society with a harder time than a lot of people because of the way they carry these instances happening to them. 5 years old, I went to kindergarten at the Baptist church there in Bonner's Ferry. 5 years old, I got in my first fight. A young kid named Ty Hartman. He ended up being one of my great friends through school. He didn't last too long after that. He went down the wrong path and lost him. Rest in peace, he's been a friend. But that was my first fight in kindergarten. He came up and he didn't like the shirt I was wearing. And he just started to pick on me, so I retaliated something back then about his shirt. And then he called me a stupid Indian. Stupid Indian. And the hurt, which turned into rage, and flooded me. I can remember as a 5-year-old feeling that. And so I slugged him in the gut. And that's all it took. You know, he was hurt, he cried, he went to the teacher. I got in trouble. I had to go sit on the balcony for recess. Wasn't allowed to play. And so it's moments like that, as a 5-year-old, knowing I was just sticking up for myself. But I got in trouble. I couldn't play. You know, and as I grew up in the elementary school and instances happened more and more, playground things, pushing each other and stuff. Luckily, most of it was just kid stuff. It wasn't racially motivated or anything like that. It was just competition. But I got to asking my dad because he had a reputation and I knew he was strong. He's my hero, right? Everyone's dad is a hero in general. So I asked him about how many fights has he gotten into. I was interested in fighting. How many fights did you do, Dad? He was like, he didn't want to talk about it. He wasn't interested in talking about it. So I kept pressing him, you know, as the kids are what to do. Kept pressing him about it. And pretty soon I got to, how many fights? How many is it? Has it been 50 in your whole life? And he kind of smirked a little bit. Like, no. I took it as I wasn't enough. So I was like, okay, 100 fights. And he's probably less than 30 years old at this point. That's 100 fights. No, okay. 150 fights? Get closer. 200 fights. Probably somewhere around there. Pretty close. Pretty close. Because he grew up in that era in the 70s. He grew up in an era where the war happened. He grew up in a time where if you didn't fight, you got ran over. And that continued throughout my adolescence as well. You know, through the 90s and then, you know, my junior high, my high school years, like late elementary years. I got a lot of fights, but comparatively it was a handful. You know, just a handful, not too many. Dozens and dozens of almost fights though, because people would pop off, say things, and generally people didn't do anything about it. But I seen some of the people I looked up to carrying that weight and doing something about it. And now I see that it led to some comfort for the ones below them. And I took that as a leadership challenge. That's how you do it. And so anybody said anything, I was ready to fight them, drop of a hat. What do you say? Oh, let's go. Constantly. And luckily, for both of us, for all of us, a lot of people backed down. They didn't want the smoke, so to speak. But I learned that just fight. Everything you came across, fight them, let's fight them. They want to say that, let's fight them. And it came down to trying to realizing that reaching people, building bridges, is more effective. came down to teaching people and understanding them, where they're coming from. That's a huge part, understanding someone who you'd rather not understand because they don't get you. But understand where they're coming from so you can reach common ground with them. And as the generational differences came down, my children, my cousins below me, they fought less and less. Maybe they fought, but it wasn't over bigotry as much. My kids, it's like a weird idea. They think I'm strange because I train them to fight. They think it's a weird thing that they'll never have to do. And the fights that they have gone into have not been through hate or bigotry. So I do see some differences and some changes happening. But I think it took me as a personal resolve to realize staying fighting against something, it's like you can't bring darkness to light. You can bring light to darkness. And I think that's what it comes down to, just understanding and trying to reach people. Because ultimately, the people who are the most angry, they're hurting. Deep down inside, they're hurting about something. And if you can touch that nerve and get to what they're hurting about, find a common ground, you can find out what you can build on and grow with. So those are just kind of the thoughts in my heart, in my mind about this. And I think we, as a tribe, have taken these same type of lessons throughout the years and quit the fight and learn how to work together and creating partnerships and relationships and keeping communication open, being transparent as you can, and just keeping open communication. And that'll help achieve better outcomes. Right?
So a couple of ways that the Bonner County Human Rights Task Force notices challenges arise. There's two different ways that I've kind of broken it down. On one side, the task force is addressing those incidences, those hate incidences that were mentioned earlier. So those are those areas that are not covered by law, like Louis Marshall brought up. And so we have this opportunity as the Human Rights Task Force to find creative ways to deter such behavior and nip it at that level, because we do know through statistics that is the pipeline that leads to behavior that can turn into a crime. And so some of the ways that we've seen this show up in the hate incident, and then the effects of that incident on people and individuals is through the hate propaganda that we've seen. We saw a lot more years and years ago, but we still see it today. And the reason why you might not notice it is because we have mobilized very quietly a team. We have kits that we give out who go around and clean that kind of stuff up. So that kind of propaganda is sometimes posted in flyers or stickers, and we clean that up. Another way that propaganda is distributed is through the mail. And actually one time, years and years ago, there was a group who had a lot of funding behind them, and they were able to distribute, because of their funding, to every individual in Bonner County. And so we were asked as an organization to give the community an opportunity to respond to that hate mail in a positive way. And so what we did was we offered the community the opportunity, when they received this mail, to go ahead and give a donation to the Human Rights Task Force initiative that was a scholarship for students to go to the Human Rights Institute in the summer. And so what we did was, as they received that hate mail, they would donate to this initiative, and then we would write a thank you and send it in the mail right back to that organization. So that they understood the goodness that we were turning it into. So Brenda has described we had a gentleman visiting our community. He was a guest in our community, and he had gone into the library, and when he came back out, this was a person of color, and when he came back out, there was a note on his windshield. And that note was a threatening note. And that was alarming to this gentleman because for a few reasons. Number one, because somebody's watching him, which is alarming, and as a person of color, we can only imagine how unsafe that gentleman felt. And then also because the note itself was threatening. So he reached out to us as an organization, and we were able to help him to understand what steps he could take, including reporting it to the FBI, who will keep track of these things. We also reached out to the library for their video footage, and then we also offered to this gentleman to go ahead and do these things on his behalf, because it's really not his job to clean up our community, right? And and he took a step on that with his permission. We went ahead and took these steps on his behalf. So that's kind of how some unique ways, and it's each different each time that we address that propaganda. Another thing that we do see is the actual hate crime itself. So we have seen the harassment. One incident in particular was a woman, I don't know if she was young, sorry, moved into the community, and her neighbor started harassing her and her father. She moved in with her father. She was a person of color. And they were intimidating also on their property using weapons. And she reached out to us, and we were able to help in another creative way. First of all, by stimulating her neighborhood to create a neighborhood watch. So we helped her to facilitate a neighborhood watch for herself. And then we did report it to the FBI. The FBI visited this neighbor of hers. And then we also were able to get the sheriff's deputy present in that area, so that the end result was that this neighbor stopped behaving in that way. Back to the hate propaganda, there was an incident where the individual members of the Bonner County Human Rights Task Force were being targeted in flyers that were being distributed, which again is a feeling of unsafe. And so we were able to, in a very short amount of time, gather 1,000 signatures to sign on to a statement to just remind these people that they are a minority and that the majority of us are cultivating a space of tolerance and equality. And so we published that statement in the paper, and immediately we got 300 more people who wanted to sign on to that, so we ended up having to take out another half page. So that's one side of the challenge that we see at Bonner County Human Rights Task Force, which is the hate incident and how that affects people. And the way that we respond is going to be nuanced, right? Because these incidences are never two the same, but we have resources, we network, and we have tools and training to be able to come up with how we are going to respond when those incidences do come. Thank you.
I'm so proud of Gary. This message is certainly what we really need today. We know that our society is changing and that communities change with societies. But it's important that those changes be positive and that they improve or make better our lives. Unfortunately, the last 2 decades in Boundary County, northern Idaho, and Idaho, that this hasn't been the case. We have experienced negativity and divisiveness, and those are undertones of hate. Most of the things we see in Boundary County residences. And the task force works through trying to address these changes. My first experience when a group of expressing a lot of discord in our community came when I was just a young teacher. The John Birch Society formed, and they concluded that we teachers were communists and that we were teaching communism in the schools. They formed a group, a strong group, and through the community, and they filled the cafeteria one evening with a meeting where they berated us. They berated the teachers, the school district, and the Education Association. I just will never forget the extreme animosity that filled that room. And it was directed at us. Our response as teachers was to reach out to our parents, to let them know that we shared their common core and that standards of core, and that we were abiding by what the curriculum from the state dictated to us, and that we were following that. And that the teacher involvement in decision-making, our schools would be stronger, and the curricula that was mandated by law was in place. In 1985, our community received information that Robert Miles, a white supremacist, was planning to move a group to Boundary County and to establish a compound. That, of course, was alarming. So our elected officials, our commissioners, the Ministerial Association, the law enforcement, and community members came together, and they formed the Boundary County Human Rights Task Force. They directed the sheriff to write a letter to Robert Miles, stating that the laws of Idaho would be upheld, and that he and his group were not welcome. They did not come. When Rawls in 2011 promoted the concept of the redoubt state that would put Idaho in the center, this was an anti-government group. People with that mindset started moving to Idaho and to northern Idaho. And when they came, they established white Christian nationalist churches, and they reached out into the community to promote their ideology. When they discovered that our city council had on its agenda an all-inclusive welcoming statement that appeared in all of their on the agenda of all their meetings, they rallied and formed a large group that attended the council meetings. They bombarded the council with their demands that statement be removed. The city council, because they had such a large group that came, moved their meeting to the auditorium, the high school auditorium. When the Human Rights Task Force chairwoman made her statement, gave testimony of reasons why that all-inclusive statement should remain on the agenda, She was met with slurs and gestures that were just hurled at her after her testimony. The council conceded to that group, and they removed the statement. This action further emboldened that group. In response, our task force decided that they would undertake a campaign of positive messaging with providing building bridges with neighbors as a theme. And they put out yard signs throughout the community showing the building bridges emblem. A PowerPoint presentation to inform the community of individuals and groups who support the white nationalist movement, and also to try to get positive means to address the challenge. That PowerPoint has been shown to hundreds of people. They also worked with a group of citizens who formed what they call the Billboard Group, to put up a big billboard at the entrance of town that would welcome those people who believed in equality, diversity, and kindness. The yard sale campaign is still going on, and those yard sales are still available. Emboldened by the actions of the City Council, the group decided that our county library and the board were wrought with corruption. They used tactics of disturbing and upsetting meetings and posting on verbal attacks on social media, demanding the banning of certain books. And of course, you've all heard about those. The county residents came together in support of the library and the board. Messages started pouring in of support. The walkways to the library were covered with supportive chalk messages of support. And supporters started attending board meetings and held fan book read-ins. Our school board has also been the recipient of the anti-public education groups. It has been commendable for the board that the Board of Trustees listened to them and then set up tours to show the people what the building needs were in the school district. And they held meetings to inform people where the funds came from and how they were spent and how curricula and policies were adopted or implemented. And of course, they still have many challenges. Our task force believes in positive messaging and doing this with factual information. We believe in standing up and speaking out for all human rights. We rely on John Lewis's words, "Don't give in to hate."
I'm being reminded that there's a timer in here. What you have to do when you're a pastor, you should have someone out in the congregation saying, "You've got 2 minutes left." I want to thank all the speakers who went before me because they actually are eloquent and wonderful, and especially Vice Chairman, I want to thank you because one thing comments you made about
the pain that causes hate is also another word, fear. And in the process, we have to ask ourselves, what are we afraid of? So I'm going to start just simply by saying, hi, I'm Andy Hinderly. I'm a Norwegian, and I'm an immigrant from Minnesota. I came here in 2015, and I came and found a place that I loved. I didn't expect to be in winter again, but I found a place I loved. Because I come from Africa, where I served 17 years in various countries in my work, in my wife's work there. But it was that first year, or going into the second year, 2016, that an issue arrived in our area. And many of you probably were part of that knowledge as well. We were having refugees coming in. And there was great fear. And the people were afraid. And lo and behold, there was immense concern. To the point that letters were being encouraged to be written to the governor to refuse any refugees. Well, the Boundary County Human Rights Group met to try to address these fears, try to figure out a way to bring people together, not to divide them. And it was decided instead of protesting, they would provide a welcoming, to say welcome into this community of which we are a part of. So that happened in January of 2016. Speakers were chosen, and I was one. All the speakers were eloquent, passionate, with their own stories of both persecution due to race, telling of their good experiences among Muslims, as well as some whose families came with some of the first waves of early settlers. And one even could say he had a mountain named after his great-great-grandfather. I can't say that. I don't know Minnesota. But when it came to my turn to speak, I had chosen to just share a couple of stories of my own experience overseas. And to end by reading from the Bible. Before I get started, the agitators among the protesters stirred up the crowd with all sorts of racial and religious statements, trying to encourage the fear that perhaps they themselves felt. So finally, I addressed the heckler. And I said, you know, you're lucky to live in a country where you can heckle. Because in many countries, you can't. So be thankful you can heckle. Be thankful we have that freedom. But I said, you're afraid. And some of you are like, we're not afraid. With their AK-47s and their dogs, they were not afraid. I might have been. My wife wasn't. She was standing right next to one and asking if she could pet their dog. But finally, I started to read. And they kept heckling. So I finally said, excuse me for saying this, they were, shut up! I'm reading from the Bible. And somebody in the back said, shut up! He's reading from the Bible! And they all shut up. First time that's ever happened to me. They usually tell me to shut up, but that's all right. And I read from this, 1 John 4:18. There is no fear in love. But perfect love drives out fear because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. What do we hope? Well, we hope that Boundary County would be seen as a welcoming place and not afraid. After we finished, there was a plan to walk across the bridge, but in the process, I got nailed by a couple of the protesters, but it wasn't bad, it was good. They talked to me. And I talked to them, and we had a conversation. It wasn't this, it was trying to understand. And at the end of it, they walked away, maybe not believing everything I had to say, but that's okay. But we at least had talked. We had not fought. We had not divided. A month later, this is where the hate comes in, somebody decided that the Lutheran Church, the Methodist Church, and the Catholic Church needed to be taken down a peg. How it happened? Who did it? Why they did it? Who can say? Who knows what's in the mind of a person? sometime later, after the damage done to the 3 churches had been done, sometime later, the same alleged person got into the Catholic Church and burned it down. Now, you may say, so what good can come from that? Well, the Methodist Church stepped up right away because they beat us to it. To house the Catholics. Because the Methodist Church had housed the Lutheran Church in the 1980s when it burned down because of a faulty organ. But the fact is, it showed solidarity in the community to care. And we see this all around us, don't we? When something happens, we come out and we help and we care. Doesn't matter what denomination, what religion, whether they come from Minnesota, California, or Idaho. We care. And when hatred raises its ugly head, we should be able to say to that, don't hate. Because Idaho is too great to hate. We should be saying, take our love into the streets, welcome your neighbor. If someone's got an Idaho plate, or a California plate, or a Minnesota plate, Oregon, wherever it comes from, welcome them. Say, you're one of us now. We don't need to discriminate. So the final thing I'm going to say is what happened about a month and a half ago. How much time do I have? Get done in 1 minute. We decided to have an event at our church called To Bring Unity into Community. And all the organizations that are part of Trinity, we have to participate, including the Human Rights Task Force. And we invited people to come to it. And someone called me up and said, are you part of this? I said, yes. You know that the Human Rights Task Force, it's a sinful organization. And I said, well, let me tell you the history of it and try to explain. At which point he said, well, you're an apostate, and you are not a good Christian, and neither are your people. And anybody who goes with you all are there. I thought to myself, how sad. He forgot 1 John. But love casts out fear. I'm just going to say that I love this county, Bonner and Boundary and Kootenai. Please, please, change. If you've got any hate in your heart, any animosity, anything about this, please, talk, listen, share. We're no different because we all have the blood that's red. We're all children of a Creator that loves us. Thank you.
We plan to close our panel with asking each of the panelists just to give maybe a one-sentence statement about why they are hopeful about the future that we're facing. And can you do that from where you are so you're just shuffling? Okay. Did you begin? Thank you.
One sentence, eh? Pretty tough.
It can be a run-on
I just wanted to mention, it's going to be more than that, sorry, but I just wanted to mention that the trajectory that I spoke of earlier, and I felt that was getting better and better, that did take a big slide around 2016, and a lot of our high school and our junior high kids were affected greatly. They're affected greatly, and a lot of them still are. The school became kind of unsafe for a lot of them students, and they had to find alternate means to get their educations in a safe and healthy manner. And so that was disheartening to see that backslide, you know, because we grew up like tough and fighting and all that and securing our spot to the point where our youth were safe enough. They didn't have to think that way. They didn't have to think that way. And that was super encouraging for me. And so when we had this little backslide here, it was troubling because our children, as resilient as they are, were ill-equipped to deal with this new onslaught of hatred, bigotry, type of things, that racism that hit them. And what I can say about hope is that I've seen many members of our community that I grew up with, that I grew up seeing, fall onto a side of the world that I didn't necessarily think was beneficial for everybody. A lot of hatred, a lot of anger. And what I've noticed is they thought a lot of the newcomers were on their side. And when it came down to really realizing the values, they understand that our local values supersede a lot of this fear-mongering things that's driving them. And that's that little glimpse, of light from our locals, realizing what our values truly are, is my hope.
So the other piece to the other challenge that we face in Bonner County Human Rights Task Force is my hope, and that is the vast amount of people in our community who want to be a part of the solution, and so last night we were actually sitting and talking with a group who came out of our leadership workshops that we put forward, where we help people to develop the skills to be able to have courageous conversations in their community. And out of those workshops, then we have this trickle-down effect where now they are mobilized and they're putting on their own events for the community and engaging conversations. And out of those events, people are wanting to also plug in and get mobilized. So there's this trickle-down effect that's happening. And so that's the other challenge we have, and also my hope is how do we cultivate the huge amount of people who want to be a part of the solution. And we do that in several different ways in the Human Rights Task Force, and I'm happy to share more with you, but my time is limited. So that's the other challenge we have in the Human Rights Task Force, and I love that challenge, and it's the challenge that gives me hope.
I guess my hope lies with the goodness of people, because I know so many good people, and I see so many good people in our younger generation. And those challenges for the younger generation are so great. And yet you see this younger generation stepping up and speaking out. And I think that gives me the hope that we are passing along to that generation lots of problems. I don't think we've prepared the world we're not leaving the world in a good place with them. And so their challenges are great, and yet I have the hope that those young people that are speaking out now, that are standing up now for human rights and for what is right in the world, that gives me the hope. I hope I'm wrong.
I just simply see the hope, and hear the hope from you all, that gives me hope. And when I look upon you all, that gives me hope as well. It's one thing that people up here get to do that you don't get to do. You have to look at us, but we get to look at all of you. And what wonderful things of gifts that you are to all of us. So thank you very much.
Thank you all for letting me share. Let's give them one more big round of applause.
You can't just jump down.
And this is your community, right? Which is why it's so important to hear from people from your community. Sometimes communities can have a hard time communicating with each other, right? Getting to the why of why somebody feels some way, or just determining, do you think somebody's wrong? And there's a difference between start to see hate crimes, because it's easy to commit crimes against people who you define as evil. And so Knight, please come on up. Knight Sword, please go ahead and walk right across there. You're good. Knight Sword is here to talk to us about one of the resources he can bring to communities, and I hope you have an opportunity to hear what he can bring to communities and what kind of problem solving he has. So, please, sir, thank you. And thank you for coming all the way from Seattle.
Thanks, Tracy. I know you can hear me, but can you see me? So, my name is Knight Sword. I live in Seattle, the traditional land of the Coast Salish people and the Squamish people. I never like a one-way presentation where we're here to impart a specific type of information, but unfortunately, that can be helped sometimes. So if you were to allow me, and please be entertaining about this, I would love to interact with you just for a brief moment. So I'm going to ask you a single question, and I hope there will be lots and lots of volunteers to provide an answer. The question is, what can you assume about me? Again, my name is Nate. A guy in a horse, and Sword is my last name, S-O-R. So what can you assume about me? Raise your hand. Yes?
You have a great sense of humor.
Oh, thank you. Thank my grandma for that. Anyone else? Yes?
Brave.
Brave? Oh, okay. Cool. Yes?
I can assume that your parents and my parents diverged a long time ago in terms of our genealogy.
Okay. Assume that correctly. Using that, what's my ethnicity? Can you guess?
Vietnamese.
Vietnamese? Okay, I've heard that before.
You're an American, just like me.
An American, thank you. Let's take one more. On this side of the room. Yes?
A traditional old-time assuming would be that you're very highly educated because you're Asian, and would we get that feeling growing up and, environment? So just on I'm saying traditional, if my first thought would be when I was younger, not necessarily.
At the University of Denver, they gave me the title of Mr. America, although I'm not 6'1", they have blue eyes, but I defended the Central Intelligence Agency's purpose to come on campus to recruit American students who, after leaving the education that they had so hard worked for, have a lot of student loans to pay back. So it's one of the employer, and there's a lot of disruption concerning that particular event, but it is from that event that I learned how to, I guess, communicate and facilitate a particular dialogue. So a lot of people don't know, but so I am a former refugee from Cambodia. My family survived the genocide. We lost 80% of our family. And I grew up being a very angry kid. I mean, I've heard Gary spoke about being 5 years old and having that fight. My fight was with the tarantulas. I have this fear for spider. My brother placed a plastic tarantula on my chest as I was sleeping there, and he smacked it. And then he jumped to the top of his lung that a spider bit me. I woke up screaming, literally looked like Spider-Man because of the marking. And as a result of that, there's this fear. So the other fear that I have is they're afraid of telling my story to people like yourselves because I didn't want to impart the vicarious trauma that some of us carry when we live through such circumstances. I can't believe I'm admitting this in public, but I did something when I was very, very young, piled a bunch of textbooks together and tried to burn it down. Did not know the reason why, and a few decades later, I'm working for the Department of Justice. It is weird. I learned what had happened as I became much more educated, and that is, we have to treat vicarious trauma. We have to find that solution for ourselves. For me, and strictly for me, I found it in new groups of friends that I never heard of before. Capella, Taurus, Aldebaran, Cassiopeia. All of these are stars, and these stars have equations, so I became an astrophysicist. And sitting there in the dark and just looking up and seeing all of these old friends who will outlive long before my days is up, I'm able to see their equations. And from that, I find peace. But I'm also an extrovert, so I needed a lot more friends. And this job gave me the opportunity to do peace work. And in this peace work, I'm sure many of you do not know my agency, but my agency is called the Community Relations Service. We are one of 52 components within the U.S. Department of Justice. And what we do is unique. And we are America's best kept secret, and here's why. I would never go into a particular situation and say you have to do A, B, and C. That's not us. We're not investigators, we're not prosecutors. We don't take sides, we're neutral and impartial. And so, what we specifically do is provide 4 types of services, and that the first is facilitation of dialogue. If we can meet under the same roof and have that conversation where we can speak our truth, most people call it a safe space, I call it a brave space because it takes courage to share some of these stories, then we can do almost anything, because in the dialogue, our critics have said that all you do is talk. It doesn't go anywhere. But some of the dialogues that we led to, for example, the passage of the first anti-racial profiling law in the history of West Virginia. And that impacted about 2 million people living in the Ohio River Valley. That says something about that particular community. And it's just community, the BIPOC community. Chief and sheriff, they joined in the conversation. And suddenly we attracted the attention of the lawmakers. And they joined in the conversation. And there were so many identifiable issues and concern that we have to have some sort of solution. And one of the best solutions that they came up with was the passage of that particular law. So that's an example of how facilitated dialogue can impact the lives of communities. And we want a stable community. We want a community that will share messages, speak their truth, share messages that counter those that may not be the type of message that you would like to hear. So there are other programs that we have, and I hope you can access them. They're free. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 allowed us to respond to incidents regarding conflict involving race, color, and national origin. The Shepherd-Byrd Act expanded our jurisdictions. Now we can respond to, prevent the allegation of either hate crimes committed based upon actual or perceived race, color, national origin, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, and disability. So please access us. I also wanted to share one thing that we have seen a lot of on television, and that is the tension, the racial tension that are happening in our schools. So we have a program called SPIRIT. SPIRIT stands for Student Problem Identification and Resolution of Issues Together. We teach these students on how to resolve conflict using time-tested conflict resolution methods. They get to spend 2 days with us. And this particular program is not only applied to students, middle school, high school, colleges, and university, but also to adults. But we changed the S as in student to SITE, S-I-T-E. So site problem identification and resolution of issues together. We have Fortune 500 companies as well as nonprofit organizations that access this particular program to have that, to have those dialogues. And so these are very mechanistic type, but it leads to step B, C, and D. And you determine where the dialogue goes, not us. Okay? All right. Lastly, a final word. My best friend, Nick Sullivan, is Irish American. And so the last panel spoke about having that one sentence that would impart to everyone. So I have one. There is a joke around this. It is an ethnic joke told by an Irish friend, very close friend of the family. I won't tell you the joke, but I will tell you the title. It is The Origin of the First Bar Fight. So you can Google that. In that joke, there is a wish that the individual bestowed upon his audience. And that is, and I quote, "I hope misery and misfortune follow you for the rest of your life and never catch up." Two. Oh my goodness, I have 2 minutes. Can I take questions? Do you have any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Actually wrote it out. It took me about a minute to say it.
That's fine.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking our questions. This is a personal testimony of mine, and it's going to end with 2 questions. Last year, I and many Boundary County residents worked towards moving sexually explicit materials from the children's section of the adult section, or to the adult section of the local library in Boundary County. I will save time on the events for afterwards should you request it. Last year, the Human Rights Task Force wrote a 6-page article comparing us to the Taliban. We captured public records of the Human Rights Task Force emailing and showing that they were working with CNN to create a video portraying us working or being the Aryan nation with our hands in the air and our arms, kind of like what Hitler does. CNN added footage of another video of Ruby Ridge. The members of the Human Rights Task Force were directly involved in labeling concerned citizens about these library books as white supremacists, Christian fundamentalists, Nazis, Taliban, and many more extreme labels, and I do have screenshots and evidence of this. They also spread rumors that we were coming to the meeting with guns and yelling. I can promise you I recorded every single video of these meetings. We never did.
So you and I should have a conversation.
My questions are coming in here.
Have the question?
It appears that your 3 agencies are presenting a relationship with these organizations, but these organizations are not bound by laws and ethics that how can they create a list to deem who are considered extremists? All while the Human Rights Task Force members are enacting and enabling extreme ideologies themselves. I remember reading in my history books about the Nazis.
They're gonna cut her off. They're gonna cut her off.
Are your government agencies able to maintain a professional image and integrity while working with the organizations like Human Rights Task Force, who are free to act and do as they will? My second question, also, is the Human Rights Task Force, since the Human Rights Task Force is made up of citizens like myself, with no authorization or professional certification to create a hate report, aka hate list, is the Department of Justice, U.S. Attorney, or FBI going to use these opinions as data collecting?
I think you and I should have a conversation.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate the
Okay, so we very much want to thank the QB tribe. I thought I could say it, Gary, and I'm Tanaka. Is that close? Close. The Boundary County Human Rights Task Force and the Bonner County Human Rights Task Force for putting this together. It takes a lot to put this together. There isn't just a free space that's put together, and so these organizations came up with a space for us to be able to hold this meeting. We have it for about another half an hour. I encourage you to have dialogue with each other, and the dialogue means listening, not waiting to respond, but talking. And I can see Mike back there wanting to have a conversation with one who just had a question. And that's important, right? Because when we only sit with like-minded individuals, We're not connecting, we're not finding out somebody's why. And again, just because somebody doesn't agree with you, right, doesn't make them evil. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about hate crimes and the statutes we have. Thank you for the work that you're doing and the continued conversations that you will have. And we look forward to partnering with you in any capacity that we can. Thank you.
I'm not here to fight with you. I'm not here to fight with you.
Hi there. Don't mind.
Is this your email? Yes, and I'd also give you my phone number because I'd love to have a conversation about this.
Yes, I know. Twice
You guys
in, like,
dictated what the difference between
8 days.
crime and incident is. This gentleman in the red sweater up there, he's the one that wrote the 6-page article in fairness to the town paper. And it was very good. Because I cried. I cried my heart out. And then I put my big girl pants up and I started the Younger County Watchman. You know, and we had a gentleman that did public records. It came up with 156 pages, and that 156 pages was the Human Rights Task Force, and they were admitting that Tim Raps was the one that wrote that 6-page article, and that they were working with to paint a narrative. I'm a stay-at-home mom.
So that would be your best.
I'm a Christian stay-at-home mom. I'm not a fundamentalist extremist. I'm just a stay-at-home. So why didn't we have representations there of others?
I'm going to let Andre and Derry rep know about that too. They might want to get out.
And I'm not agreeing with any of that. Matter of fact, Peter Kramer from Boundary County, we've been working together, and I actually did get a flyer. Now, I didn't personally get it, but someone was sent it, of the hate group that was trying to start a white supremacist group up here or whatever. I immediately sent that to Kramer, and I said, I don't agree with this, and I'm sending it to you. So I'm 100% against any kind of discrimination whatsoever. But there's got to be that fine line. There's got to be that fine line where someone's allowed to.
Well, yeah, I hope it continues to go. And you live up in Bonner, right? So your former neighbor.
But the Human Rights Task Force are the ones that are labeling people Nazis and extremists and Christian fundamentalists, and they have no authority or training on doing this. And so they're sending this hate report to the Spokane Department of Human Rights Task Force, right? And then where's that going from there? Is that going to your office?
Teaching history online. Good.
Did you post this meeting with them? The Department of Justice's name is not.
Reminder sent out so I can get in touch with them.
The Department of Justice's name on here.
Yeah.
So you're opposed to this
Done some stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So your insignia is on this hosted event.
It's like 300 bucks for the whole kit.
And you're now aware that they're called people white supremacists, Nazis, and so forth. I'm concerned that you're going to get yourself into heated issues when you're associated with a group that claims love, but then turns around and hates themselves. That's what I'm in fear of. That's honestly, sir, that's what I'm in fear of.
over the different options, 52 different offices within that particular umbrella. And joining the US increases this. It's like being on the radio.
Well, I think you should go back to your superiors and let them know, and I'll be glad to email you. By tomorrow morning, you'll have an email in your desk with my phone number, and I'd love to sit down. I will drive all the way to Spokane to have this conversation with them, because it's a very serious problem. The last time I read about this in the history books, it was the Nazi era, and 6 million people died. It's not a good thing to be, waging war between each other over who is what label and who is what label. And you guys put your name on their flyer. So I recommend talking to the superiors about this. Very serious. I also wrote a 6-page report, or actually it was 2 pages, but anyways, it's got all the public records of the rights task force and thank you for having a conversation with me, sir. I really appreciate it. Because my biggest thing is I want to bring awareness and change. Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to get over.
Email me about the your space.
Based. Based.
I live in Post Falls. Yeah. Are you from Potters?
Based.
Okay. Alright. Pastor Andy Henry? Yeah.
I'll fill you guys in a minute. I want to ask a question of someone.
Thank you very much.
Base. Base. I'm at the front. We'll go out this way. My folks are gone. So I'm gonna go out here and talk to you guys for a minute. So I completely disagree with everything that was being said in there. Completely everything that was being said. So a lot of people were talking about why did I label it the way I labeled it. Well, if you pay attention, if you've been paying attention for the past 2 years, past 4 years, you can tell that people have been, the trigger words that people use, right? They use a lot of trigger words. So that's why I labeled it the way I did, because of the stuff that they were in there saying. You heard them talking about white national Christians or white Christian nationalists. You heard them talk about all the race stuff. And those are all the words that the left uses, right? Wild, and they're talking about the hate, but yet the left is against Israel right now. Don't make much sense. And they're talking about anti-Semitics, this and that. And they're saying not to be against hate, but they're all against Israel right now, right? But at the same time, don't systematic, whatever their stupid words that they like to throw around, all their poppy words, all their words that are, that they want to slap labels on and get us in an uproar. But they're talking about Christian hate, and I wanted to ask some of them, what does that mean? Or the white Christian nationalism, what does that even mean? I don't even know what white Christian nationalism mean. And if you want to say white Christian nationalism, let's look at the Israel and Jewish people. Are they white people? Yet Jesus was a Jew So why they're talking about white Christian nationalism and Christians who follow after Jesus and want to be like Jesus? Does that even make sense for these white Christian racist people to be worshiping a Jewish man, a Hebrew man who wasn't even considered European or white? It don't even make sense. But this is a type of propaganda and the agendas that these people push, and they use all these type of words. So that's why I labeled it the way I labeled it, standing against conservatives or whatever, however I labeled it, because that's what the whole talk was about in the first place. So I really want to get some of their opinions. So I'm going to try to ask some of them. They all seem like they're washed up though. So who knows? Like they don't want to really probably conversate, but that's why I came up here, you guys, to do that, to show. And this again is being spread throughout the nation. It's not just here. The whole FBI and everybody who's involved, DOJ, it's 93 different places. 93. So, and who would think? Everybody thinks Idaho, right? Idaho's safe. Idaho's conservative. There's a lot of woke junk happening in Idaho, and it's been left off the radar. Like it hasn't been highlighted. Idaho isn't this beautiful red state as it once was, or as people think it is. So, it don't make sense. It makes no type of sense. But anyway, I'm going to sign off. You guys, if you want to help or do anything, again, I'm going to head to the Jesus March this weekend. PayPal me, Venmo, Cash App, Zelle, Give, Send, Go. Those are all ways you can contribute and help out if you'd like. So this weekend, Jesus March, Sacramento, California. I'll see you guys there. God bless you guys. Talk to you later.